Up, Colin? How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm really good. My new habit of sitting outside doing podcasts. It's the best ever, and how appropriate to talk with you. Uh, I'm stoked to have you here, man. There's so much to dive into, dig into, unpack with your journey. Just super impressive. So thanks for jumping on.
My pleasure, man. Great to be here.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so much you've done. It's like mind-boggling, and not only that, the effort that has to go into it is just superhuman. And how appropriate and perfect you speak on and write about mindset, because I can only imagine you're facing yourself, right? You're facing yourself all the time with infinite space and quiet and dealing with the monkey mind. So I guess the first question I just have to ask, like, 10-time world record, you know, explorer, adventurer, Antarctica. That's where you first popped on my radar. That freaking Antarctic adventure you took. It was like, wow. Like, I think you said something like, if you sweat too much, you could die. Like, yeah, a
Yeah,
lot of.
indeed, yeah.
So I mean, and obviously then you just keep going and going and going and rowing and all of this stuff. It's like, whoa. So when did this kind of happen for you? When was this desire? Because this is beyond desire of just like, I need to move my body. This is like some deep stuff. And how did that occur? And how did that kind of happen? And what were some of the first, call it, feats that you undertook?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot to unpack, but you say so much about mindset, and certainly there's no doubt, all the things that I've done. Certainly crossing Antarctica alone for 54 days without seeing a single other person, that's a deep journey into the mind, no doubt. But that wasn't my first foray, as you say. To me, it's been an evolution of being curious about diving into the mind, diving into the human capacity, diving into what we are all capable of. And really expressing myself in that way through adventure and exploration. But for me, a little bit of the origin story goes back, many years ago, 15, 16 years ago, I think it was, where I was severely burned in a fire. I was traveling in Thailand, didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, but I saved up all through high school, all through college, painting houses, and said, I'm going to take a trip around the world, on the cheap, the cheapest plane ticket I could find, the cheapest youth hostels I could find, but just have an adventure. And it was an extraordinary experience as a young person, all until it came to a crashing halt when I was on this beach in rural Thailand, and I decided to jump a flaming jump rope. I thought that looked like a fun, good idea, and boy, was I wrong. That rope wrapped around my legs, lit me on fire to my neck, and survival mode kicked in. I had to jump in the ocean to extinguish the flames, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned. And to make matters worse, I was in the middle of rural Thailand, so it was an island off the Gulf of Thailand, didn't have any proper medical facilities, had a moped ride down a dirt path instead of an ambulance. There was a cat running around my bed and across my chest in the ICU. It was not what you would want in that situation. But through that, it's a bit of a longer story, but the kind of condensed bits of it is my mother really came to my bedside, like quite literally came and sat by my bedside, and she was crying with the doctors in the hallways. I now know this, but she never showed me her own fear. She never showed me her own negativity. Instead, she kind of wrapped me in this bubble of positivity and really this infectious mindset, which I've now come to call, and I write about this in my new book, The 12-Hour Walk. I call this a possible mindset. I define that as an empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities. And so instead of her saying, well, you're a stupid 22-year-old that jumped the flaming jump rope and you ruined your life, you're never going to walk again normally, she looked at the other way and she says, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You're a stupid 22-year-old kid that jumped the flaming jump rope. This is a bad situation, but your life is not over. What do you want to do on the other side of this? How, visualize the most positive future you possibly can. And through not just positivity, but through hard work and dedication, she inspired me to set a goal of racing a triathlon. 18 months after I was severely burned in this fire, told I'd never walk again, I raced my first triathlon, and to my complete and utter surprise, I didn't just finish the race, but I won this triathlon, a Chicago triathlon, beating out 5,000 other participants. But it's funny, even in that moment, it's easy to be like, well, I guess I'm just a great athlete or something like that. It's not where my mind went. My mind went back to both myself as well as every single person on this planet, every single person listening to this podcast, realizing that as humans, we all have these reservoirs of untapped potential to achieve extraordinary things. And a lot of that starts with the mind. And so my curiosity, and again, I ask sometimes ask people, what's your Everest? My curiosity is I want to climb Mount Everest. I want to see if I can cross Antarctica. I want to see if I can row a boat across this. But I love to ask people, what's your Everest? Because I don't expect everyone wants to go freeze their butt off in the middle of Antarctica by themselves. I don't think that. But I do think that we are all seeking fulfillment, inner peace, camaraderie, friendship, community, love, and by all sorts of different ways of getting there. My canvas just happens to be the ends of the earth and mountaintops. And so I don't know, man, it's a long answer to your question. I apologize, but it's where did it all start? I mean, I think it's been a lifelong thing, but I do think this moment, particularly with my mother infusing me with this possible mindset in the depths of despair, because what I've come to realize, it doesn't matter who you are. Life's hard sometimes. You don't have to be a stupid 22-year-old kid and get, light your body on fire to have hard things and difficult things happen. It doesn't matter if you're the richest, the poorest, the happiest, the saddest. Like, life's tough sometimes, but it's how we react. And that possible mindset says, hey, there are infinite and limitless possibilities in my future, and how can I architect and create that?
Yeah, man. And I really thank you for telling that story, even though condensed. But I mean, you said so many things in there, and what a gift, because your mom didn't sound like she blew off the situation, right? And just kind of, because there's this other side that some of the world kind of like doesn't even deal with it, and almost in a delusional kind of way is not looking at the world as a realistic way, with still having an optimistic view, because you have to deal with a real situation of going, it's like, some of the spiritual circles, they call it like a spiritual bypass. You're actually not dealing directly with what's going on. You're blowing around it. It's like, hey man, it's all good, when you're looking at the person going, yeah, that doesn't read. Right.
No. And I think that that's a valuable balance of what she instilled in me in this moment, was that she didn't sugarcoat it at all. Like, she's like, yo, you made a massive mistake and you're paying the natural consequences for taking that kind of risk. Like, you lit your body on fire. You can't walk. Like, she's not, we're in Thailand. We're far away from home. We can't even understand a lot of, the conversations we're trying to have with doctors because of the, language barrier. Like, this is a bad situation. But there's a balance between that and then still having the positive outlook. Now, the other way is like, this is so bad, and then you're getting in this fear loop and this fear bubble of like, it's so bad and life's never going to be the same, and I'm never going to walk, and this is going to be horrible, and this is that, which is, I think that is also the negative. So it's interesting. It's what's the middle ground between the realistic vantage point of like, hey, this sucks, this is hard, this is terrible, but also looking forward and saying, okay, but we can move past this. One of the things that resonates for me, and again, I write about this in the 12-hour walk because it's so important to me, is people ask me with all these adventures on the other side of this, are you afraid of dying? You must have a death wish. You walk across Antarctica by yourself. You climb Everest twice. You row a boat across the most dangerous ocean in the world. You must just be a thrill seeker, have a death wish. What I've thought about that question a lot, and I most certainly don't have a death wish, but what I've thought is that I'm not so much afraid of dying. What I'm most afraid of is not living, right? Like, I'm afraid of not living life to its full capacity. And I've come to think of life sort of on a spectrum of 1 to 10 for all of us, 1 being our lowest low moments, 1 being in that hospital room, getting burned in a fire, having, being so afraid. We all experience ones, and 10 being the highest highs, the elation of falling in love, or in my case, crossing Antarctica and having this great achievement that no one in history had ever done, or, I could name a number of other high highs. But I've come to realize that we only experience our 10s because of the ones, not in spite of them, not because we're hedging against them, but allowing ourselves the potential to take some risks and fail along the way and get scraped up. And I think too often in our modern society, people sit in this comfort zone, what I call the zone of comfortable complacency, kind of between 4 and 6, just kind of sitting there being like, yeah, my life's fine. I've got a job that I don't like really love, but it's fine. It pays the bills. You know, I'm married to someone who, you know, they're fine. They treat me okay. You know, just kind of like fine. It's not terrible. It's not bad, but it's just kind of fine. And the truth is, the reason people end up there, in my opinion, is they're so afraid of the discomfort. They're so afraid of having any ones that they're hedging against all the ones not happening. But by doing that, you don't allow the potential for the 10s either. So you get range bound in the 4 to 6. So, you know, I encourage people to, again, it's been said many times, but to step outside of that comfort zone, to take those risks, knowing, yeah, you might get scraped up a little bit along the way. You might experience the ones, but that's also going to open the door to the possibilities of the 10s. And to me, the richness and the full tapestry of life is in the full spectrum of the 1 to 10 experience.
Sorry, I was on mute. What you're getting at here is so important because it is this side of the world and people that don't want to believe that there's no discomfort in world. And in that complacency, you're not even allowing yourself to have this fullness of it. And dare we say, isn't the ones, isn't the struggle the propeller? Isn't the challenges the propeller for possibility? You know, it's like if you weren't faced with the challenge, you wouldn't even sign up for the triathlon. So you didn't even know your capability until you had this gnarly event to reassess. And then you're like, because we don't get to live without crap happening. That we
Totally.
don't, it's just literally not gonna happen. So what you're saying is like that, I mean, do you find, this is a question that popped up as you were saying, do you find that when you ask people what they really want, like what is their Everest, do you find that people even have a hard time even verbalizing and acknowledging even what their Everest even is?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I have asked that question to thousands of people from all different ages, backgrounds, etc. And it does seem to be there's sort of a split in people. There are certainly those people who immediately are like, my Everest is this, or my best life looks like, and they can list the 5 attributes of exactly what that looks like whenever. Then oftentimes they tell you a bunch of excuses as to why they're not doing that. And we'll talk about limiting beliefs and excuses. That's a whole other topic. But then there is a large percentage of people for sure that go, I don't know what my Everest is. And I've dug deeper with that kind of subset of people and said, well, why is that? And I think I found 2 reasons. One is people are afraid to dare to dream. People are afraid to verbalize that because they don't want to be let down by not having that. By going, well, I always wanted X, Y, and Z, but because of, you know, who I am or where I'm at in my life or this, that's not possible. So I'm not even going to allow myself the potential to dream about summiting their own Mount Everest. And to me, there's some sadness in that. But the overall thing is in addressing that, actually. So my new book, it's called The 12-Hour Walk, and we can talk more about it, but at its core is a call to action. That's saying you can read this book. It's full of great advice of mindset, overcoming limiting beliefs. You know, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I'm not strong enough. What if I fail? And it really breaks down that through a bunch of rich storytelling, etc. But at its core, at its true essence, it's saying, but forget all of that. You want to live your best life? You want to summit your Everest? You want to cultivate a possible mindset? Well, I have a one-day prescription for you, which is simple as can be. Go outside your house, put your phone on airplane mode, and spend one day, 12 hours by yourself, walking. Now, if you if you're not in like the best shape, this is not a physical challenge. This is actually a mental challenge. So I don't care if you walk for 1 mile. I don't care if you walk for 50 miles. I don't care if you take 100 breaks. It is about taking one day, no podcast, no music, no inputs, and going into your own body, your own mind, and walking. And I have realized that I've tested this with tons of people. The origin story comes from my own very long walk across Antarctica. But the depths that we can find within our own self, within our own psyche. And for those, coming back to the not knowing what your Everest is, I love people to contemplate what their Everest is. And if they know what that is, the 12-hour walk breaks you through a bunch of exercises in that day to calcifying and to solidifying how you can actually achieve your Everest, how you can unlock your best life. The subtitle is Invest One Day, Conquer Your Mind, and Unlock Your Best Life. And I have seen people's lives change in just 12 hours because there's so much clarity without the noise of the day-to-day life of social media and emails and texts and podcasts, whatever. And I'm not vilifying that technology. I'm saying, yeah, of course that's a part of my life, part of all of our life. It's great. But take a day away from it. Take a day to go into your mind and have that walk. But if you don't know what your Everest is, if you're starting out on this 12-hour walk, you're taking on this challenge to shift your life, but actually your core problem is, I don't even know what my best life looks like. I don't even know what my Everest is. The exercise is still valuable because I say, well, great. Well, your goal for today during the 12-hour walk is just to ask yourself one question is, I want to discover what my Everest is. I want to take this 12 hours in my own head, in my own mind, allow the negative thoughts, the excuses, the positivity, the love, the loss, all the things that come up when you clear and quiet your mind. But at the end of the day, have some clarity of like, oh, my best life, my Everest looks like this. And so it's an opportunity to have that contemplation away from the rest of the noise. And so it can really work really powerfully, whatever category you find yourself in. The I know exactly what my best life looks like and I want to figure out how to get there, to the contemplation of I don't even know what that looks like, but I do want to have some clarity on what that does look like.
God, I really love that because I know for me, I always say, like, people ask health advice all the time, and it's like, you don't know yourself. If you can't interject and understand who you are, what you are, we know now from a nutritional standpoint, from a health standpoint, that a positive mental outlook on yourself is infinitely more than any physical input you could put in your body. And I love what you're saying here is because it's not a dogma. It's literally just stopping the freaking noise, because the noise inputs are only increasing,
Totally.
And so I'm curious with you, because obviously you put yourself in a situation you didn't see anybody. Like literally, you're literally on another planet, which for me, I'm like, oh my God, I have a big breath of just like, oh, that sounds so good on the one inner level, but on the physical level, I can't even imagine what you had to go through. But I'm curious for you, because clearly you had this mindset programming from your mom, which was pretty clear in that one. But when what was the first one? I mean, you did all the peaks in the States, you did the Everest, you did the Antarctica. What was it? Was it literally for you the mindset, I want to be alone, I want to do all this stuff, physicalize it and bring these worlds together? Was it a physical kind of lead, and then all of a sudden you discovered this depth of self? Like, how was that? And maybe it was all of the above.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I think it also comes from, the curiosity, the zest for life of actually saying, what more am I capable of? And through each one of those expeditions, you mentioned several of them, setting the speed record for climbing the tallest peak in each of the 50 U.S. states, so all 50 mountains in just 21 days. The world record for the 7 summits, so the tallest mountain in each of the 7 continents in 131 days. Everest twice. Rowing a boat across the most dangerous ocean crossing in the world, the Drake Passage. But each one of them has their own curiosity. I'll double down on the Drake Passage one for a second because it's an interesting story. So we set out, and it was me. In this case, I was with several others. There was a team of us, 6 of us, on this tiny little rowboat, 28 feet long, only about 2.5 feet above the water, no sail, no motor, and we set out to row a boat across the most treacherous stretch of ocean in the entire world, the Drake Passage. So that's from the southern tip of South America to Antarctica. And the Drake Passage is notorious. I mean, not in like old fashioned times, but in modern times, 2008 or 9, I think it was, maybe, in the last 10, 12 years, a cruise ship sunk in the Drake Passage, like a proper high functioning, massive cruise ship sunk. That's how bad that this ocean is. 40, 50 foot swells are common, icebergs, all this kind of stuff. And I completed my solo crossing of Antarctica at this point, but I thought to myself, well, I want to experience Antarctica from a different vantage point. And so, I set out to do this crossing, again, that no one in history had ever done. I get Discovery Channel on board to film a big feature documentary about it. They're funding a bunch of it, all this kind of stuff, whatever. And then I kind of look in the mirror at myself, and someone mentions to me, they're like, wow, I didn't realize that you have been rowing your whole life, that you've been doing stuff in the ocean and seafaring and all this kind of stuff. And I look back at that, I'm like, well, actually, I've never rowed a boat before in my life, ever, anywhere. Literally, not at summer camp, not like ever. Like, I've never been on a rowboat. You're like, what are you talking about? Oh, so this Drake Passage row, this must be happening in 10 years then. And I'm like, no, it's happening in 3 months. I'm doing this in 3 months. And on its surface, you could say, that's a ridiculous story. That's so reckless, like whatever. But at its core, it's a belief in identifying identity, right? So saying, I'm not a rower. If you say I'm not a rower, it's like, okay, I'm not a rower and I'll never be a rower. That's what that mindset tells your brain, your consciousness. But you add one word to that, I'm not a rower yet. I can learn this, I can grow, I can evolve, I can become anything. That is so tremendously powerful. I'm not good at math. I'm not smart at this. I'm not creative. It's the negative things we say that we are constantly telling ourselves we aren't this. But when you shift that to say, I'm not this yet, or I can evolve and become this over time, it's incredibly powerful. So the Drake Passage row for me is just another iterative of, I realized, what do I do have? Well, I've been in harsh environments before. I've put myself through cold. I've been to Antarctica before. I know how to work in a team, etc. So I have a lot of things that are actually required to take this crossing. Now I need to learn how to row. And there's a funny chapter 4 of the 12-hour walk, breaks down me falling on my face in a tiny little river, day 1 learning how to row, only 3 months before trying to row across this. So I'm very vulnerable about like my own shortcomings and things that I'm not good at, right? It's not like I'm just great at stuff right out of the bat. I have to learn and evolve. But the curiosity is what brought me there, to say, wow, like, I love exploring the natural world. I know you're passionate yourself, as am I, about preserving this beautiful planet that we have, and making the world a better place. And I feel like I hadn't explored the ocean. I mean, the ocean make up so much a majority of this entire planet. I want to see the ocean up close and personal, and I sure did. I'll tell you what, we did find those 40-foot swells out there and those icebergs. And if you want to watch the full documentary on Discovery, you can see us in some pretty rough shape out there for sure. But we completed the crossing and became the world's first to do that crossing. But for me, again, it's not the external, the accolades, the world records, the New York Times best-selling books. I'm proud of all of that. Sure, I'm not going to pretend like my ego isn't somewhat fed by a little bit of that. But the true essence for me is the curiosity. My litmus test is, would you still be doing this if no one was watching, or if you couldn't tell anyone about this? And my resounding answer is yes. And the second I say no, I'm only doing this because I want other people to think it's interesting, that's the second I know, well, then this is not worth it at all. There's no reason. That's not the right reason to do it. But the win-win, of course, and why I'm so passionate about this book, The 12-Hour Walk, is I share all these stories of these adventures and things I've learned and vulnerabilities and me struggling with my own limiting beliefs and trying to battle back and overcome them in a fun, easy, digestible way. But rather than write a book that's like, and so I did all these amazing things, right? Look at all my world records, right? This is so cool. Look at me, right? It's like, I'm only writing this book because I want you listening to this to take your own 12-hour walk. I want you to unlock your own best life. I want you to go on an adventure of your own. And I specifically created something that has basically no barriers to entry other than your own determination and grit to complete this. This costs nothing. I encourage you to walk out your front door. Yes, you have to find the time, but we can all find the time in our life if it's something that's important to us. 12 hours might seem long, but it's really one day. How many days go by in your life that you're never going to remember, that you never can, what did I do last week? What did I do last month? What did I do last year? Countless. I promise you, you will remember these 12 hours and they will have a profound impact on you. So I'm so excited. Yes, this is a book. The 12-hour walk is a book, but more at its core, I think of it as it's a global movement. My next Everest is to inspire 10 million people to take the 12-hour walk. I've built a website and an app and all these things to help support this idea, but from the vantage point of just, I am passionate about sharing this free and accessible idea with the world so that more people can live in their power, in their truth, in their strength.
Dude, that makes me so freaking happy to hear that, and because of the world today, because of the noise that's consuming people, because of the loss of curiosity, the loss of, wow, this world, this life, this planet, this possibility, this numbing that seems to be going on, this blaming, this problems, all of this stuff. I tell you what, I'm in. Like, any way I can do to help you with this 12, I'll do it. I'll promote it. Let's do it.
Heck yeah, man.
I think it's awesome. And because the only thing to say it simplistically, the only thing that can happen is a better version of the person.
Yes.
That's the only thing that can happen. And it doesn't matter the level. I can't help but to think of, I think it was in 97. I was in Colorado. I was working with this Native American group for going through some shit. And every day doing sweat lodges and with these guys. And I did 96 hours of no food and water and didn't leave a spot in Colorado. And it was the first time in my life where there was nothing but me. And it's intoxicating as well as scary as shit, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt.
It's like those are Antarcticas, these are, and I think there's this sprinting away of our pain. There's a family member of mine this morning is going through some hard stuff. I have to have a hard conversation with someone that is dear to me and who is abusing themselves and abusing other people. And I know 100% it's just avoiding themselves. Mm-hmm. And it comes out in all of these different ways. And I think the medicine that you're talking about is the silence, the quiet, the self is our answer without a doubt, in any way, in every way, in any person, in every direction, in any situation. Quiet.
Totally.
Take 12 hours, take some time, stop, right?
And it's powerful. It's so interesting because there's at a later date, I'd love to hear all about those 96 hours of the sweat lodge. That sounds incredibly powerful. And I love learning more about stuff like that. But at its core, we live in this world that is just accelerating. You said earlier, accelerating with more and more noise. And, you could say, I'm vilifying technology, or, you should get off, we shouldn't be doing this, but it's beautiful. You and I are having a conversation remotely with one another on this podcast and sharing positivity around the world, which means we've created these technologies that have this beautifully positive impact to be able to spread ideas at scale, to be able to connect with one another. That is a beautiful thing. So it's not like all of the noise is bad. But what we're missing is, in an earlier time, there used to be momentary brief moments where you're not connected, you weren't connected to the internet, you were bored sometimes, you had a little bit of time to breathe or relax. Or certainly if you go back hundreds of years, there's certainly more and more of that if you go through historic human time. which is why the way our brains are wired, to have the dopamine hits and spikes, but then to also have sort of a cadence of recovery and recycling of our minds and our thoughts. And in our modern times, with these cell phones in our hands and all these things, like, we are constantly bombarded with noise and sound. And so the 12-hour walk is not a way of, what we really should all be doing is turning off our devices and living as hermits alone in the world forever. It's actually to say, no, exist, thrive in this modern world. There are so many amazing ways to thrive and be a part of it and be connected. But the medicine, like you said, I like the way you said it, the medicine of the 12-hour walk is but to take a minute. To take a minute to breathe, take a minute to look what's inside. And as you said, it can be scary. People's own trepidation around this idea have to do with, wait, well, if I'm not distracted by these 5 other things, what am I going to confront within myself? That might be uncomfortable. The entire book is written from the perspective of each chapter, like I said, breaks down a common limiting belief, something I've experienced, something we've all experienced. I'm not strong enough. What if I fail? What if people criticize me? I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time, etc. Right? Things that we've all, as human beings, you pretty much have experienced that negative interior dialogue at some point, probably thousands and thousands of times. But what's interesting is, even anyone listening to this podcast, are thinking, okay, this guy's talking about this thing of turning off my phone for a day and walking for 12 hours. And hopefully some people are quick hell yes, like you were, and I appreciate that, Darren. I'm excited for you to do the 12-hour walk. But some people are going, is this for me? Is this for me? And what's interesting, what I found, is that what's coming up in the people's heads that are having some resistance to this idea are limiting beliefs. They're saying, well, I've got kids and a busy job and whatever. I would never be able to find the time. Or honestly, like, I'm not in that good a shape, and so I couldn't go that far, and I don't like being uncomfortable and being on my feet that long. It's gonna this, and yeah, this isn't for me. And if you realize, the 12-hour walk is a 12-hour walk exercise. But in this moment, in the inception moment of you're hearing about this idea for the first time, it's also a mirror. I'm holding a mirror up to you by having this conversation, and your limiting beliefs are popping up in your mind as to why you may or may not want to participate in this. And what I found is that whatever limiting beliefs you are personally assigning to the 12-hour walk are most likely the same limiting beliefs that are popping up in all different places of your life that are holding you back from actually living your best life. Meaning, if I don't have enough time is coming up for you with thinking about doing the 12-hour walk, it's possible, or maybe likely, that you're coming up with that same limiting belief or that same excuse all throughout your life, and that's actually what's holding you back from all the multiple things. Forget the 12-hour walk, but the things that you actually are deeper or more care about. And so what I love about this exercise is the 12-hour walk, the silence, the stillness, the activity of it is deeply powerful. And that's the life-changing element that I've seen throughout all the people who have done it. But more so, the getting to the start line of actually saying, okay, I'm doing the 12-hour walk on this date. Tell your husband, tell your wife, tell your partner, tell your friend, I'm doing this, I'm committing to it. And when I walk out my front door, I'm not coming back for 12 hours and actually doing that requires you most likely to get over a series of limiting beliefs just to get you to that point. But when you do it, when you prove to yourself you can do it, when you get to the other side of the 12-hour walk, that's when that possible mindset calcifies. That mindset goes, oh, I know that limiting beliefs are going to pop up in my mind, but I get to choose how I react to them. I get to actually rewrite that narrative in my mind, and the next time that limiting belief, oh, I don't have enough time, or I'm not strong enough, pops up, go, no, I do have enough time. I made time for the 12-hour walk. I am strong enough. I can get through this. And that has that ripple effect, and that's why it can unlock your best life. I will say one last thought on that, which is, I'm excited for you to do this. You can do the 12-hour walk any single day. Book comes out August 2nd. You can do the walk any day. It's built for you to do any day, 365. But on September 10th, depending on when you're listening to this, September 10th, I'm doing like a massive call to action to have mass participation, meaning we're all walking alone, but we're walking alone together. I'm going to walk on that day. So I invite people to do this on any day. But Darren, if you're looking for a specific date to put it on your calendar, I don't know what you're doing on September 10th, but September 10th, is the worldwide 12-hour walk day to really, uplift this movement as I launch it into the world.
Okay, cool. I'm definitely I'm putting that on my calendar right now.
Amazing.
And the cool thing is, like, I'm already in my head I just by saying that to you, I'm acknowledging what's going on and what you just said, right? Because I'm like writing another book right now. I'm doing this. I'm shooting another show. Like, it's like, oh my God, but this is gonna happen and that's gonna happen, and it's amazing. Just like you were saying, just by the act of asking yourself to do it is already bringing up the limitations, which is in itself the start of the exercise that you haven't even started the exercise, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Which is something that, it's all, most of our actions or our habits are buried in our subconscious, right? And it's only upon asking these questions that invokes these things to pop up. So I invite everyone right now to ask them what that would look like to walk 12 hours and then just see all the stuff and the limitations and the babysitters and the things and whatever there's no way I could leave because of this and that, and just see all of that stuff. And so encourage everyone to get the book, to be inspired to do that, and then write on the calendar if we can do September 10th. That would be epic. I already have a plan. I'm going to walk outside of my door, and I actually have access to about 35 miles of the Santa Monica Mountains, so I can definitely keep myself busy for 12 hours.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I'm getting geared up. So since you spent so much time with yourself, and when your own discomforts, obviously mentally, physically, all of these things come up, what are some of the things that you use to overcome so that you keep achieving, so you keep walking one foot in front of the other, and that you don't be paralyzed by those discomforts? And if you have any examples, that's cool too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Several different tricks and tactics and things that go through my own head. I have a pretty deep meditation practice. I've done several 10-day silent meditation retreats, Vipassana silent meditation retreats, obviously these expeditions and stuff like that. One mantra that's very common, that has been passed down for thousands of years, but I think is really potent, is "This too shall pass." Right? This too shall pass. You've heard it many times. Everyone's heard it, but it's powerful. There's a reason that's been passed down by so many different lineages of different philosophies and everything, of just life is ephemeral, right? These moments pass, and so it's a good reminder in the hard times. I'm discomfort, this is hard, whatever. Okay, this too shall pass. But it's also a really important reminder on the highest highs of, like, you're riding the high, and you're like, oh, this too shall pass as well. It's the peak arcs of both. So I think that's really important for me. And then I think purpose. Having a greater purpose, a deeper why. And there's no right answer to that question. It can literally be, I'm willing to suffer for this because I want to support my family and make money, this, that. I mean, that's a worthy and noble purpose. It can be, I'm on a path to self-discovery. There's just something in my soul that this thing that I'm doing is so important to me. I mean, you're talking about writing a book. I've written a couple books. Sounds like you've written a couple books. Like, that's a hard thing to do. It just is. Like, it's just time consuming and it's a grind. And even though the words you're putting on the page you're passionate about and you want to share, like, it's challenging. But then you sit, I'll just use that as an example. It's like, I sit with that, even struggling in certain moments of just the creative process, writer's block, or you're tired, or you're stuck on something. We've all, if you've written a book, you've been there. It's impossible not to. And if you didn't care about sharing whatever you were sharing with the world, you'd go, you know what, like, this just isn't worth it. I'm going to throw it away. But when your values are aligned, your purpose is aligned with your why, when I'm thinking, I think the world is going to be a better place if 10 million people take the 12-hour walk, this free prescription that I'm passionate about sharing with the world, not because I'm trying to get anything in return other than just people doing it and participating and learning about themselves. I think that will make the world a better place, and I'm passionate about leaving the world in a better place. That why gets you through that hard moment when it's midnight and you're looking in front of your computer like, what do I write in this next paragraph? I just can't get the idea that's in my head down on paper, right? So, I mean, I could give you a million examples from expeditions and whatever, but those two things, that this too shall pass, as well as aligning, with your why. with your why. And it's funny. There's, I've heard. This is something you and I, as men, certainly will never be able to fully relate to, but it's something that crosses my mind, which is, I've had women say to me, I could never even run a 5K. I don't run. I'm not a runner. I could never run a 5K. Right? It's 3.1 miles. I'm like, okay, that's fine if you're not into running, but you could if you wanted to. And I've had this kind of conversation, this dialogue before. And then the next thing that, a few minutes later, they're talking about the 4 kids that they have. I have 4 kids. And I'm like, so you birthed 4 children. So let's just look at that. That is a million times more difficult than running 3.3 miles. Let's just put that there. You carried it for 9 months, and then you are raising this human being every single day with deep purpose and compassion and, of course, frustration and lack of sleep and all the things. But you are diligently doing that every single day. And I point to that of going like, well, that clearly is a deep-seated why. You are willing to get up and put your best effort towards that every single day. When you're tired, when you're sick, when you're not having a great day, you still show up, and you did that. So let me tell you, you could run a 5K, you could run a 10K, you could run a marathon, you could run 100 miles because you got, a child or 2 children, whatever that is. And so again, something you and I will never relate to. Only in our minds can we even imagine what that is like. But that's an example of a why that's embedded in our DNA and in the sense of child rearing. But there's a million other examples of that. Whatever your alignment of your why, that gets you through these hard things. That allows you to suffer and benefit from the challenge. Like you said, the triathlon was put in front of me as a goal in my mind, because it was difficult, because it was going to be hard, and I needed to work through it to get there. But by working through it to get there, I got to the finish line and had this elation, this satisfaction, this achievement for me that was very deeply and fulfilling. So,
what's so cool about that with your mom is that for her to help set that goal for you, here's her child suffering, maybe can't even walk, and she's clearly understanding the situation and cares deeply about you, keeping with the mother theme, because they're extraordinary human beings. My mother is as well. And yet, she doesn't want you to suffer. She doesn't want you to be hurt. But she helped you because she also probably knows you intimately more than sometimes even ourselves, our moms, at least in the beginning of our lives. So, that's so freaking cool and amazing. And it just seems to me that you couldn't have done any of this stuff if you had a death wish, if you just wanted to do it, if you just wanted to break a record. There's no way. There's no way that that's possible, because we have to actually extend beyond ourselves in order for that primordial soup of infinite to kind of show up for us. You know what I mean? It's like
100%. Yes. I'm smiling because I agree to all of that. So my mother's an amazing influence. My wife, Jenna, we've been together for 15 years, and she is the most incredible positive influence. And all of these expeditions, it's my name on the book cover, although if you read the book, you quickly realize it's both Jenna and I's life, because there's so many stories about both of us. But we've built and we've dreamed all of these things together. We've had our ups and our downs. When I'm crossing Antarctica, I'm walking those footsteps alone, but I always joke to her, I was like, you walked every single step with me out there. She was in it, emotionally in it with me. She planned it with me for over a year. She was the only person I talked to, because I would call her from a sat phone, exhausted and afraid every single night, and she held that space for me. And I say, you only benefit because you didn't have to have the cold on your face, but you walked every single step with me. And it was a beautiful, profound experience for us, and we've had many of such, holding space for one another, and we ultimately have had some great adventures to actually sharing the physical space together. But the final chapter of my previous book, called The Impossible First, that was about my Antarctica crossing, the final chapter, spoiler alert, most people know this, I did make it across. I was the first person in history to do it, etc. So it doesn't give away the ending, but most people know that before they start reading that book. But The last chapter is not titled "I did it, I'm awesome" or "Look at me, I'm so freaking cool." The last chapter of the book is called "Infinite Love." And I had been dragging this 375-pound sled that was full of food and fuel. I wasn't getting resupplied, so I was doing something called unsupported, and so that meant that I couldn't add extra food, get dropped off for me or something like that. So which meant that by the end, I was running on fumes. I literally was burning 10,000 calories per day, and I was eating 7,000, which meant on day one, not to mention day 54, I was burning a 3,000 calorie deficit. I was a bag of bones when I got to the end. My hips are sticking out. My ribs are sticking out. I'm emotionally exhausted. I can barely walk. I mean, I was on the absolute limit. Someone attempted this crossing a few years before me, and they made it 71 days and just less than 100 miles from the finish line. They ultimately fell ill and died. I mean, you're really pushing your body to the absolute brink. And in that moment, in that last day, that last push, those last few days where I was nearing the finish line, I wasn't overcome with this, oh my God, I'm about to do it, and the New York Times is going to put me on the front page, and I'm going to be on the Today Show. Those things happened externally, great, whatever. But what I wrote about and what I felt in that moment was infinite love. This deep connection to, you said, the infinite, the primordial, although I was so physically alone, I felt more connected to my wife and my mom and the people that have supported me, that I love, that love me, and then the greater world, people I haven't met, but just general humanity. I have this nonprofit on supporting kids and school kids and inspiring them to take on their own goals and their own dreams. That's what I felt. I was the most alone person on the planet. I was about to do this, externally great achievement in the world, and all I could feel, so much so that I put my arms out. This might sound silly to your listeners, but I put my arms out in those last few days, and I would say, infinite love, feeling this resonance of positivity, this resonance of deep connection with soul. And that was by far, that doesn't even pales in comparison to the external achievement or the finishing the crossing or this. It's finding that place within ourselves, that why, that deep connection to self. And that, the 12-hour walk really is written from the vantage point of, I realize you don't necessarily have to go all the way to Antarctica. I'm glad I did, because I wanted to explore that part of the world. But what really got me there was the stillness, the silence, the willingness to be by myself, the willingness to look inward. And all those days weren't full of infinite love. The first several days before that, I had hard days. I had days where I cried, where I actually cried so much that I had frozen tears on my face because it's minus 30 degrees outside, and I start crying, and the tears, they freeze your face. Talk about an all-time pathetic feeling. But when it was all said and done, I was left with this deep resonance of infinite love, this deep resonance of purpose, freedom, joy, love, compassion, whatever you want to call it. And that, I think, can fuel any of us.
Dude, it's just, it touches me so deeply in what you're saying, because it's like, that's what this human experience is really all about. And we go back to the distractions and this precious opportunity of being human and reaching for the truth. What greater truth is that? Is that connection to that, the truth, and stripping down to everything but that, and that infinite love, and that side of us that we seem to weirdly sprint away from and have a hard time getting to. And just sharing that story, and I'm not surprised because I could feel it, just sharing that story gives me and everyone listening the real reason of 12 hours, right? The real reason why. It's almost like you're offering a gift and a hand to everyone, saying, listen, I was able to touch something that changed my life forever, and I offer you this opportunity to touch that space, that place, that infinite that is here, that is always here.
100%.
Always, 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 always available. But yet, to your point, you're offering a remedy or a balance to the imbalance, and we all know the imbalance. to be back in touch with the real essence, the real truth of who we are. And there's a lot of different paths to that. They can have religious tones, they can have spiritual tones, they can have all that, but truth is it doesn't have to. And it's whatever it is. It's that love, it's that beyond definition, beyond, you just telling that story just allows me to tune in to the frequency of it, right? Just to feel it. It wasn't my experience, but I feel what you're like. I feel you're transmuting, or excuse me, you're transmitting that. And I know as a person listening to you that you did experience that. It is a truth that you have that you can't take away.
Absolutely. Yeah. The and the excitement that I have building up inside of myself as I launch this 12-hour walk idea is the universality of it, the accessibility of it. To, like I said, you could be sitting in a mansion somewhere, you could be sitting in a shack somewhere, you could be sitting wherever somewhere, and the truth is I went all the way to the ends of the earth to learn this lesson that we could actually apply anywhere, which is the external trappings of life. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great, but we all are equipped with this ability to go inward, to just take a moment to just check in, and that crosses, as you said, it crosses all religious boundaries and spiritual boundaries and dogma, or all different socioeconomic classes. It's like every single person can benefit from taking some time. And we talked about supporting others. I've talked about a lot of people who have supported me, but I also talk about in this book, we have this myth in the world sometimes that self-care, looking after yourself, is somehow selfish. That it's somehow, oh, well, if I'm not there for my kid every single second, I'm a bad parent, so I shouldn't take this time to myself. Or, my job requires me to do this, and if I don't do that, then it's not good for, whatever the larger duty. And I'm not saying blow off your responsibilities. But what I am saying is, if you take the time to take one day to look inward at yourself, you're going to be a better parent for the next 10 years. You're going to be more efficient at your job or your other priorities that do take up a lot of your time. This is not a sacrifice, an if and then. If I do this, I can't do this. It's if you do this and take this moment to know yourself better, you are going to be a better version, as you said earlier, a some percent better version of yourself. And therefore, the ripple effect through all the other elements of your life are going to be exponential. They are going to be profound. I'm not saying abandon your child for months on end. I'm saying your child might not remember the one day you weren't there, but they're going to remember the next 10 years where you were attentive and present and self-aware and tuned in. That is what's going to make the difference. And this is a conduit over a relatively short period of time to tap into that essence.
Yeah, instead of reactionary, resentful, exhausted, tired, overwhelmed, all of that stuff that's so easily cultivated when we avoid kind of the stillness and the space. A couple little questions, because you've been in the world a lot on this beautiful planet, really seeing things that no other human has even seen. I know for me, traveling around a lot in my life and really being in the outskirts of things has been some of my most rewarding, and also peeling the layer of what's really going on in the world and people's real struggles, and also the planet and this just extraordinary blue ball that we get to have. What are some of your thoughts on, I know this is a big topic, but we don't have to, but I just have to, because I am curious what your take is on I guess your view of the world, and maybe what can be done, and what you've seen, and maybe even the messages you've received about some steps we can take to balance out and protect really ourselves from ourselves and respect this Mother Earth a little more.
Yeah. I've been blessed to, like I said, as a kid, I didn't travel very much, and that trip to Thailand was me saving up for years and years to be able to see a little bit of the world. But over time, I've kept that pursuit and that passion, and made it a vocation through these adventures and figured out how to make it work. And I've been so fortunate to. I think I've been to 70 some countries. I've been on, every single continent, at least 4 times for every continent. So I've been on every single continent multiple times, and some many more. Seen lots of corners and edges of the world. And when you ask me that question, I have 2 responses. I could, you and I could talk about this for hours and hours, I'm sure, but two top of mind responses. One is about the natural world, and the other is about the sort of human world, or the society at large. And so I'll start with the natural world, which is our planet's fragile. Our planet's resilient, but also fragile and delicate. And watching things change as rapidly as they are, there's so many moments that pop into my head. One is I did an expedition to the North Pole. And for those that don't know, it's not intuitive, but the North Pole is actually just in the middle of the ocean in the Arctic. But there's sea ice, there's frozen sea ice on top of that point. So unlike Antarctica, where you're walking on a continent that has a landmass below it, to reach the North Pole, you're literally walking around on frozen sea ice. And I was on that expedition with a couple people who had actually been, I was my first time, but other people that had been out in that part of the world before. And as we're approaching the North Pole, my partner on that expedition, he actually fell through the ice into the ocean. It's minus 40 degrees outside. He falls through this really thin, patchy ice and falls into the ocean. Thankfully, pulled him out and got him dried off and all this sort of stuff. It was an intense moment. But he said, man, 5 years ago, I was at this part of the North Pole, and there wasn't a single piece of ice that was thin enough for a human to fall through on skis. And now we were skirting the edges of all sorts of open leads and open parts of the ocean, having to go widely around different sections. And again, that's a part of the world that we don't often see. I feel grateful that I've been able to see it, but of course, 99.999% of people are never going to see the North Pole or the far Arctic. But that ice, as we know, that melting of that ice has sweeping impact across the rest of the world. We don't normally think of Africa as a place that has snow, but Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa, actually has some snow, a little bit of a glacier snow up on the top. I first climbed it in 2013, and I went back and climbed it again in 2016. And just in those 3 years, there was a dramatic difference. And again, this is not a lot of snow. There's a tiny little piece of snow basically at the very, very, very top, and it's the only permanent snow in all the entire African continent. And just in that time, I saw it disappearing. And that's easy stuff to point to: snow melt, Arctic melt. We hear that through these talks about climate change, but the cataclysmic effects of that across, the entire environment are very stark. And I wish more people could see that and experience pieces of that, because the second you see that, the second you tune in, the second you slow down and you look and you inhabit and you're in nature, you start to realize how valuable it is to protect it. I of course, have never been to space, but the astronauts talk about that feeling of being on a space shuttle, looking back at Earth, and how it forever changes you. How you look back and all of a sudden you don't see the lines of countries or continents or this. You see the fragility of this crazy blue ball that we're all spinning around on, and the desire. I mean, literally every astronaut, I think they say, from every different country and whatever, still has that same experience of like, whoa, that's the Earth, looking back on it. And that's how I have felt inhabiting some of these cold and remote places on our planet that are ultimately really fragile, but also beautiful. I mean, rowing that boat in Antarctica was, beating me up in these 40-foot swells. But when we got to the shores of Antarctica, there were, humpback whales jumping right beside my boat. There was hundreds of penguins everywhere. It was teeming with life and freshness. And that's one of those parts of our world that's not, inhabited by humans. And so it still is so vibrant and so alive. One thing that really sticks out to me about Antarctica and the wildlife there, the penguins specifically, is no humans permanently live in Antarctica. There's a few tiny research bases down there, but basically there's no humans down there. we are used to walking up to a bird in a park in a city. You're in the Santa Monica Hills or in Central Park, or even I'm in Oregon right now. In Oregon, obviously it's more rural than a big city, but still the animals are afraid of humans, rightfully so, because we hunt them and we this. In Antarctica, those birds have never seen humans. The penguins walk toward you. They walk toward you. You walk up to a penguin and it walks toward you. And it's such a bizarre feeling because we are so used to a squirrel running away from you or whatever, a deer or this or that, being skittish, understandably so, because of our impact on the world. But the penguins just literally will walk straight up to you, so curious, and just kind of look at you and be like, huh, who are you? Hello. And it makes you think, there's in the DNA of all these other animals, they have this flight or fright, response to us because we have basically had such a negative impact across, the environment. So anyways, that's my meandering on that. I could go on and on and on. I won't go too on that. But then the human level is interesting. Where this is a lot of conversation about the importance of solitude, the importance of checking in inward, the importance of taking that 12-hour walk. And I obviously, clearly, am very passionate about that idea. But as an interesting byproduct of that, what I'm actually passionate about is people having that look inwards so they can actually be a more positive contributor to society. I'm not encouraging lifelong, monkhood or solitude. And a lot of that comes down to community, right? There's a chapter in the book really all about community and support and friendship and family and on the importance of that. And as I've gone around the world, the thing that's most interesting to me in terms of this topic specifically is in our modern society, in our, quote unquote, first world society, post-industrial, the US, Western Europe, etc. We have all sorts of things. We have all sorts of bigger houses or nicer cars or things like that in contrast to sub-Saharan Africa or in contrast to rural remote parts of, Central Latin America, etc. But what comes with that, or what has come with that in a human trend, seems to be more isolation and more solitude and people sitting alone in bigger houses away from each other, away from connecting with one another. I was in New York City not long after my Antarctica crossing a few years ago, and I was talking to a group of friends. About 100 people came over to this townhouse that were all interested in my crossing and curious and asking me questions, and I had just gotten back. And one of the questions that came up was, oh my God, you must have been so alone. How did you deal with the isolation and being alone? And I told them that infinite love story, that connection. But then I said, so you guys are all New Yorkers. Raise your hand if you know the name of the person you share a wall with in your apartment building. 0 hands went up. I said, raise your hand the last time you spoke to a stranger in an elevator or on a subway. You do that. You take elevators and subways every day. Just the last time you just said, oh, hey, hi, my name's Colin. What's your name? Not a single hand went up. And what I said is, in our modern society, particularly in our country, etc., you can be surrounded by people and be desperately, desperately alone. And I do think that in some of these other cultures that have less economic resources, there's a higher dependency on community as a result. And interestingly enough, again, there's all sorts of other issues, economic disparity, health issues, etc. But from a human level, the connection to community that I have seen around the world in some of these quote unquote, less prosperous parts of the world is actually an important lesson to take back to the rest of our life, because as humans, no matter how rich or poor we are, we desire belonging, we desire community, we desire to feel a part of something, we desire to be supported, as well as the amazing benefits of supporting others. And in our modern society, as we get more and more advanced and tech savvy and whatever, we're losing connection to that, for sure.
Dude, I feel like I could talk to you forever. There's so much here, and there's so much and your view on the world and your willingness to go inside yourself, as well as involve yourself, is such an amazing balance. And I'm just grateful to have this time with you, and I'm so excited about your book, and I can't wait for people to get a hold of it. And I honestly can't wait for a 12-hour walk for sure. So
amazing.
Dude, thanks for being here. Thanks for the primordial uh, touch inside that you're providing and you're offering to people through the space and the place that you found inside yourself doing these extraordinary events. And I'm just super excited and stoked for you and grateful for your contribution.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I couldn't be more excited for you and hopefully your community at large to participate in the 12-hour walk September 10th. Do it any day, but if September 10th is in flow for you, put that on your calendar, and I'll definitely be following up with you, Darren. I feel a new friendship forming, so kindred spirit for sure, and I look forward to some longer conversations outside around a campfire or something together at some point soon. So much love, my friend, and thanks for everything.